The restaurant smelled like rosemary and expensive wine, the kind of place where everyone whispered and the silverware was heavier than it had any right to be. I tugged at my collar for the third time in as many minutes, wondering what possessed me to let my sister Dorothy set me up on a blind date. "Table for Mr. Theodore Walsh?" the hostess had asked, and I'd nodded, following her through the maze of white tablecloths until she gestured to a corner booth. That's when I saw her. She sat with perfect posture, a book folded closed beside her, water glass, dark hair pinned up in a way that suggested both elegance and practicality. When she looked up, her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray, with hints of something deeper, maybe blue, maybe violet, depending on the light. "Theodore," she said, and there was a question in her voice that should have been my first clue. "Yes," I said, sliding into the booth before my brain could catch up with the situation. "Sorry I'm late." "Traffic was—" "You're not late," she interrupted, studying my face with an intensity that made my carefully rehearsed small talk evaporate. "You're nervous," I laughed, caught off guard. "It's that obvious?" "Your eyes," she said simply, tilting her head. "They're doing this thing where they keep darting to the exit, but they also keep coming back to me. Like you're not sure if you want to run or stay." He'd crept up my neck. I was 32 years old, a literature professor at Columbia. And this woman I'd known for 30 seconds had just read me like one of my freshman students' essays. "Which do you think I want to do?" I asked, finding my voice. She leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. "Stay. Definitely stay." Your eyes came back to me 4 times in the last 10 seconds. A smile tugged at my lips. "You counted?" "I notice things," she said with a shrug. "It's what I do." The waiter appeared, saving me from having to respond, though. I wasn't entirely sure what I would have said. As he poured water and recited specials I didn't hear, I studied the woman across from me. She wore a navy dress with small buttons down the front, and there was an ink stain on her right thumb. A writer, maybe? An editor? "So," I said once the waiter departed, "Dorothy tells me you're—" "I'm sorry. Who?" She frowned, genuinely confused. My stomach dropped. "Dorothy. Dorothy Walsh, my sister. I don't know anyone named Dorothy." The confusion on her face deepened, and then slowly, like dawn-breaking understanding, flooded her features. "Oh no. Oh, you're not." She pressed her hand to her mouth, but I could see the laugh threatening to break free. "You sat at the wrong table?" "I what? You're not my Theodore?" She was fully smiling now, and it transformed her face entirely. "My Theodore is probably somewhere in this restaurant wondering why his date hasn't shown up to their table." I should have stood up immediately, should have apologized, made my excuses, found my actual blind date. Instead, I sat there, frozen by the absolutely ridiculous situation and the way this stranger's smile made the whole mortifying moment feel less like a disaster and more like the beginning of something. I started. "Your eyes are doing it again," she said softly. "That thing where they're telling me you want to stay, are they?" She nodded, and there was something vulnerable in the gesture, like she was admitting to wanting the same thing. "I'm Evelyn Clark. And my blind date is probably a very nice man, but—" She trailed off, glancing at the book beside her plate. "I brought a book just in case." That's how confident I was about this evening. "Theodore Walsh," I said, even though she already knew, and I've been dreading this all week. I only agreed because Dorothy threatened to show up at my office with a marching band if I didn't. Evelyn laughed, and it was warm and genuine. My roommate Beatrice made similar threats. She said I needed to stop hiding behind research papers and actually meet a human man. "Research papers?" "I'm an archivist at the New York Public Library," she explained. "I spend most of my time with documents from the 1800s. The people in my life are generally very dead." "I teach Victorian literature," I countered. "Same problem." We stared at each other for a moment. I felt something click into place, some recognition that this mistake might be the best thing that had happened to either of us in a long time. Evelyn bit her lip, clearly weighing something. "We could," she said slowly, "tell them we had a lovely time and just stay here, together, at the wrong table." Could. my heart doing something complicated in my chest. But that would be lying to them. It would. Another pause. Then Evelyn reached across the table and picked up her phone. I should probably text my Theodore. Let him know there's been a mix-up, right? Yes. I should find my table. But I didn't move, Theodore. Yes. Eyes are still doing that thing. I met her gaze directly this time, no darting away. What if they're right? What if I do want to stay right here? Something shifted in her expression, surprise, pleasure, and a hint of fear all mixed together. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A tall man with slicked back hair was arguing with the hostess, his voice carrying across the restaurant. I specifically requested table 7. My date is expecting me at table 7. Evelyn's eyes widened. That's him. That's Theodore Brennan. Beatrice showed me his photo. I should have felt relief that my accidental intrusion was about to be corrected. Instead, I felt a sharp disappointment that this strange, perfect moment was ending. I should go, I said, but still didn't move. You should, Evelyn agreed. But her hand had somehow found its way across the table toward mine, stopping just short of touching. The other Theodore was getting closer, following the hostess's apologetic gestures toward our table. I had maybe 30 seconds before the most awkward introduction of my life. Evelyn, I said quickly, quietly. What's your last name again, Clark? Why? Because I'd like to find you again. After this disaster is over and we've both survived, our actual blind dates, I'd like to find you and maybe sit at the right table this time. Her fingers closed the distance, barely brushing mine. The touch lasted less than a second, but I felt it everywhere. I'm in the Rose reading room most afternoons, she whispered, 3rd floor. Usually at the desk near the window. Then Theodore Brennan arrived, and I stood up, and the moment shattered into awkward apologies and confused explanations. I found my actual table number 12, where a perfectly nice woman named Margaret was checking her watch hand spent. The next hour making polite conversation, while my mind stayed 3 tables away, wondering if Evelyn's eyes were doing that same thing mine were, telling her she'd rather be somewhere else, with someone else, at the wrong table, 3 days. I gave it 3 days before I walked into the New York Public Library. Like a man with an actual research purpose rather than the desperate hope of seeing a woman whose hand I'd barely touched. The Rose reading room was exactly as grand as I remembered. From my graduate school, days 52 feet high ceiling. Arched windows stretching toward heaven, long oak tables where scholars bent over their work in reverent silence. It smelled like old paper and possibility. I spotted Evelyn immediately. She sat at the desk near the 3rd window, just as she'd set, her dark hair caught in a shaft of afternoon sunlight. She wore glasses today, tortoiseshell frames that she pushed up absently as she examined what looked like a very old letter, lips moving slightly as she read. For a moment, I just watched her. This was insane. I'd spent an hour with her, most of it under false pretenses, and here I was, standing in a library like some lovesick undergraduate, trying to figure out how to approach her without seeming like a stalker. She looked up. Our eyes met across 50 feet of hallowed silence, and I watched her face transform, surprise melting into something warmer, something that gave me the courage to walk forward. Theodore Walsh, she said softly as I approached, mindful of the silence. The man who can't find his table. Evelyn Clark, I countered. The woman who reads too much into eyes, their very expressive eyes. She closed the folder in front of her, giving me her full attention. How was your actual blind date? I grimaced. Margaret was lovely, very accomplished, partner at a law firm. She talked about corporate litigation for 45 minutes. And you counted the minutes? I noticed things too. Evelyn smiled, pushing her glasses up again. Theodore Brennan is an investment banker. He explained cryptocurrency to me 3 times, even though I told him I understood it the first time. Did you? Not even a little? She laughed quietly, but I nodded and smiled and died inside. I pulled out the chair across from her, raising an eyebrow in question. She nodded permission, and I sat, feeling like I'd just won something. So why are you really here? Evelyn asked, leaning back in her chair. I'm guessing you didn't suddenly need archival assistance. Actually, I said, pulling a notebook from my bag, I'm working on a paper about epistolary relationships in Victorian literature. Letters between writers, that sort of thing. I thought you might be able to point me towards some collections. It wasn't entirely untrue. I'd been thinking about that paper for months. The fact that I'd suddenly become motivated to actually write it was merely convenient. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, and I could see her trying to decide if she believed me. Epistolary relationships. Letters, I confirmed. I know what epistolary means, Theodore. I work with historical documents, right? Of course you do. She studied me for another long moment, then stood. Follow me, and try not to get lost this time. I followed her through the stacks, watching the way she navigated the space with easy familiarity, trailing her fingers along spines as she walked. She moved like someone completely at home, and I found myself wondering what that must be like, to have found your place so completely. Here, she said, stopping at a section near the back. She pulled down 3 boxes, handling them with the reverence they deserved. The Browning correspondence, some Dickens letters, and this, she opened the 3rd box carefully. Letters between Margaret Fuller and Ralph Waldo Emerson. Not romantic, but intellectually intimate. Sometimes that's more interesting. Sometimes I agreed, watching her hands as she turned pages with practiced care. She had long fingers, graceful and certain. The ink stain was still there on her thumb. Do you always have ink on your hands? I asked before I could stop myself. She glanced down, then smiled self-consciously. Fountain pens. I'm old-fashioned. My roommate Beatrice says I was born in the wrong century? I use fountain pens too, I admitted. My students think it's pretentious. Is it? Absolutely, I grinned. But the ink flows better. We stood there in the quiet stacks, surrounded by centuries of other people's words. And I felt that same click I'd felt at the restaurant, like finding a piece of music that matched your heartbeat exactly. Evelyn, I started, then stopped. Unsure how to continue. Theodore, she said, and I loved the way my name sounded in her voice, careful and warm. I'm not very good at this, I admitted. The last time I asked someone out was 5 years ago. It ended badly enough that Dorothy banned me from dating for a year. Banned you? She said I needed to work on myself before inflicting my emotional unavailability on another human. Woman. Evelyn's laugh was quiet but genuine. Beatrice says the same thing about me. Apparently I use dead people as an excuse to avoid living ones. Are we both disasters, then? Possibly. She closed the box of letters gently. Probably. Here's the thing. Theodore Walshev, been thinking about you for 3 days. About your eyes and your nervous hands, and the way you looked at me like I was more interesting than your actual date. I don't think that's nothing. My heart was doing that complicated thing again. It's not nothing, I said quietly. Definitely not nothing. So what do we do about it? Thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea. Thought about my last relationship, which had ended with thrown books and accusations of caring more about Dickens than my girlfriend. I thought about the careful, quiet life I'd built, full of lectures and papers and solitude. Then I thought about Evelyn's hand almost touching mine across a table, and how sometimes the wrong choice turns out to be exactly right.
Ow.
We could start. With coffee, I suggested, at the right table this time, one we choose on purpose. Revolutionary, she said, but she was smiling. There's a place 2 blocks from here. They have terrible coffee but excellent pastries. I go there most mornings. Before class. Mornings before class, she repeated. That's specific. I'm giving you an opportunity to accidentally run into me, I explained. Tomorrow. 7:30. Just in case you happen to be in the neighborhood and happen to be craving a terrible coffee and excellent Danish. Evelyn pretended to consider this. I do occasionally crave terrible coffee. Excellent. Then I'll see you there, or I won't. Depending on whether you happen to be in the neighborhood. Depending on that, she agreed. I stayed another hour, actually. Looking through the letters she'd recommended, while Evelyn returned to her desk by the window, every so often, I'd glance up and find her looking at me. and she'd quickly return her attention to her work, a slight flush on her cheeks that made me feel like maybe I wasn't the only one losing my mind. When I finally left, I walked backward. For 3 steps, unable to stop looking at her. She waved. A small flutter of fingers, and I nearly crashed into a graduate student carrying a stack of books. "Sorry," I mumbled, steadying both of us. "Love," the student said knowingly, adjusting her glasses. "Makes everyone clumsy." I wanted to argue, to explain that it was far too soon for that word, that we'd barely known each other a week. But as I pushed through the heavy doors into the autumn afternoon, couldn't quite convince myself she was wrong. She came. I'd been sitting in the corner of the cafe for 20 minutes, working on my 3rd cup of genuinely terrible coffee and pretending. 2 grade papers, when Evelyn walked in. She wore a green coat that brought out those violet undertones in her gray eyes. And her hair was down today, falling past her shoulders in waves that made my fingers itch to touch. "Fancy meeting you here," she said, stopping at my table. "Are the odds?" I stood, nearly knocking over my coffee. "Would you like to sit? I haven't gotten my terrible coffee yet." "Right, of course." I gestured uselessly at the chair. She smiled and went to the counter, and I watched her. Watched the way she counted out exact change. Watched her add too much cream and not enough sugar. When she returned, she sat across from me like it was the most natural thing in the world. So she said, wrapping both hands around her cup, "You weren't lying about the coffee. This is aggressively bad. I warned you. You did." She took another sip, made a face, "But the pastries better be worth it." I pushed the bag I'd bought toward her, cheese Danish, still warm. Evelyn opened the bag, and her expression softened. "You bought this for me? I might have hoped you'd show up." "Theodore Walsh, are you a romantic?" "A Victorian literature professor who uses fountain pens and buys pastries for women he barely knows." I raised an eyebrow. "What gave it away?" She laughed and broke off a piece of Danish, offering it to me first. It felt significant somehow, that small gesture of sharing. I took it, our fingers brushing in the exchange. "Tell me something true," Evelyn said suddenly. "True, something real? Not small talk. We've already established we're both disasters at dating, so let's skip the part where we pretend to be normal." I considered this, turning my terrible coffee in slow circles. I moved to New York 8 years ago to get away from my ex-fiancé in Boston. She married my roommate 6 months after I left. Evelyn winced. "That's very true, and very painful. Your turn." She took a breath. "I haven't been on a date in 2 years. I told Beatrice I was busy with work, but really I was just terrified of being boring. Someone realizing that I'd rather spend Friday night reading 100-year-old letters than going to bars." "That's not boring," I said immediately. "That's passion. There's a difference, is there? Boring is having nothing to say. You have everything to say. Just about different things than most people." She looked down at her coffee, and I could see I'd touched something tender. "Beatrice says I hide. Do you?" Sometimes she met my eyes again, but I wasn't hiding when I told you to stay at the wrong table. That was the bravest thing I've done in years. My chest felt tight. "Tell me something else true." "I've been coming to this cafe every morning this week," she admitted, "since Tuesday. Just in case you meant 7:30 every day, not just today. Evelyn, your turn." "Something true." I reached across the table and took her hand properly, this time palm to palm. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Not for 3 days, not for 30 seconds. And it's completely ridiculous because I don't know you. Not really, but I want to. I want to know everything." Her fingers tightened around mine. "That's very true. Too true. No such thing." She smiled, but there was something nervous in it. "This is going to be complicated, isn't it?" "Probably. I'm not good at this, Theodore. At letting people in. At being vulnerable. I'll probably mess it up. Then we'll both mess it up together," I said. "At least we'll have that in common." We sat there, hands linked across the table, terrible coffee growing cold beside us. Well, the morning crowd flowed around us. A businessman jostled our table on his way out. A mother with 2 children asked if we'd move our bags. Life happened in all its chaotic normalcy, and through it all, we held on. "I have to go to work," Evelyn said finally, glancing at her watch. The library opens in 20 minutes, and I have a 9 o'clock lecture on Middlemarch. Neither of us moved. Tomorrow? She asked. 7:30? Same terrible coffee? I'll be here. With pastries? With pastries? She stood, gathering her coat and bag, but kept hold of my hand until the last possible second. When she finally let go, I felt the absence like cold air rushing in. "Evelyn!" I called as she reached the door. She turned back. "This isn't nothing," I said, echoing her words from the library. "No," she agreed, and her smile was like sunrise. "It's definitely not nothing." It appeared in my faculty mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked between a department memo and a student's late assignment. Cream-colored paper, my name written in elegant script, sealed with actual wax that bore the imprint of a rose. I knew Evelyn's handwriting by then. We'd been meeting every morning for 2 weeks, sharing terrible coffee and pieces of our lives. But seeing it here at my workplace in this formal way made my hand shake slightly as I broke the seal. "Dear Theodore, I'm writing this because some things are easier to say on paper than across a cafe table. Even after 2 weeks of terrible coffee and excellent conversation, you asked me yesterday why I became an archivist. And I told you it was because I loved history. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. Here's what I didn't say. I became an archivist because letters felt safer than people. Writers were dead, their emotions preserved but distant. I could read about passion and heartbreak and longing without having to risk feeling them myself. And then I met you at the wrong table, and suddenly I want to risk everything. This terrifies me, Theodore. You terrify me, not because you're frightening, but because you make me want things I've spent years convincing myself I didn't need. You make me want to be brave, so here's what I'm proposing. Let's write to each other, not instead of our morning coffee, but in addition to it. Let's have the kind of epistolary relationship you're researching. Let's be our own Victorian novel, messy and romantic and real. Tell me things you can't say out loud. I'll do the same. And maybe, through all these words, we'll figure out what this is between us. Yours, I'm trying that word on for size. When I'm enclosing a key to box 247 in the library's collection. It contains letters between 2 scholars who never met in person, only corresponded for 40 years. I thought you might find it interesting for your research. Or maybe just for us. I read the letter 3 times standing in the mailroom, while colleagues bustled around me collecting their own correspondence. Then I read it a 4th time in my office. Door closed, heart hammering. She wanted to write. Letters. Real, physical letters like people in Victorian novels. It was completely anachronistic and utterly perfect. I pulled out my fountain pen and a sheet of my own paper. Dearest Evelyn, your letter arrived today, and I've already read it 4 times. I'm writing this response immediately, while I should be preparing for my afternoon lecture, because I can't seem to think about anything else. You want to know something I can't say out loud? Here it is. I'm falling for you, and it's happening faster than anything I've ever experienced. Every morning when you walk into the cafe, I feel my whole day rearrange itself around you. Every time you laugh at something I've said, I catalog it in my memory like a precious artifact. But here's what scares me. My last relationship ended because I loved literature more than I loved her. Or at least, that's what Elizabeth said when she left. She said I used books as a wall, that I could quote Austen but couldn't actually talk about my feelings. And she wasn't entirely wrong, so I'm terrified that I'll do the same thing with you. That I'll hide behind beautiful words on paper instead of being brave enough to be vulnerable in person. That you'll realize I'm better at analyzing other people's love stories than living my own. But I want to try, Evelyn. I want to write you letters and drink terrible coffee and figure out what this is, even if it scares me, especially because it scares me. I'll read those letters you mentioned, the 2 scholars who never met. And I'll think about whether it's romantic or tragic that they spent 40 years writing to each other without ever being in the same room. Tomorrow morning, 7:30. I'll have your pastry waiting. Yours, I'm trying it too. Theodore. I mailed it from the campus post office on my way to class, and spent the entire lecture on George Eliot, distracted by thoughts of Evelyn reading my words. When I finally checked my faculty mailbox that evening, there was already a response. She must have written it the moment my letter arrived. Theodore, I'm not falling alone. That's all I can write right now because my hands are shaking, and Beatrice is asking why I'm crying over a letter. I don't know how to explain that. Someone finally sees me, not the careful, controlled version one show the world, but the messy, scared, hopeful version underneath. Tomorrow, 7:30. Yes, the letters in box 247 were written between Dr. Margaret Fletcher, botanist in Boston, and Professor Henry Morrison, a geologist in San Francisco. They'd met once briefly at an academic conference in 1897 and spent the next 40 years corresponding about science, philosophy, art, and life. Evelyn and I sat in a private research room, the box open between us, reading passages aloud to each other. Listen to this, Evelyn said, her finger tracing a line from 1903. Your letter about the sequoias arrived on the worst day of my year, when the grant money fell through and I thought I might have to abandon my research entirely. But you reminded me why I started, not for the funding or the recognition, but for the simple joy of understanding how things grow. You saved me, Henry, from 3,000 miles away. And his response, I said, finding the next letter. Dear Margaret, if I saved you, then you have saved me a dozen times over. Your letters are the highlight of my weeks. Sometimes I think I do my best thinking in the days after receiving your words, as if your mind sparks something in mine that lies dormant otherwise. We looked at each other across the open box. They loved each other, Evelyn said quietly, didn't they? For 40 years, but they only met once. One afternoon in 1897? Sometimes once is enough, I said. And I wasn't sure if I was talking about Margaret and Henry anymore. Evelyn carefully closed the box. What happened to them? Did they ever see each other again? I'd done the research. Earlier, no. Margaret died in 1937. Henry attended her funeral, traveled all the way across the country. He never married, neither did she. That's tragic, is it? I asked carefully. They had 40 years of deep intellectual and emotional intimacy. They shared their entire lives with each other, just through different means. But they never, Evelyn stopped, color rising in her cheeks. Never what? You know? They never, she gestured vaguely. Had a physical relationship? I finished. Right? That. I watched her fidget with the edge of a document, not meeting my eyes. We'd been writing letters for 3 weeks now, meeting every morning, slowly peeling back layers of ourselves. We hadn't moved beyond held hands and lingering looks. Every goodbye ended with a moment of hesitation, like we were both waiting for permission to take the next step. Evelyn, I said softly. She looked up. Do you think what we have is enough? The letters and the coffee and the conversations? I don't know, she admitted. I love the letters. I love having time to think about what I want to say, to be careful. With my words, it feels safer somehow. But sometimes I want to be reckless. She said it so quietly I almost missed it. Sometimes I want to stop thinking and just ... feel. My heart was hammering. What's stopping you? You mean besides 2 years of self-imposed isolation and a lifetime of being afraid? Besides that, she smiled, but it was shaky. What if I'm not good at it? It's the physical part. I'm good at words, Theodore. I'm good at research and analysis and keeping things at a safe distance. But actual intimacy, actual vulnerability, I'm terrified I'll ruin. This beautiful thing we're building. I reached across the box, finding her hand. You won't ruin it. You don't know that. You're right, I don't. I threaded my fingers through hers. But I know that every morning when you walk into that cafe, my entire body responds. I know that when you laugh, I feel it in my chest. I know that I want to kiss you so badly, it's becoming a distraction in all my lectures, Theodore. But I also know that I'll wait, I continued, for as long as you need. Because this, I lifted our joined hands, is already more than I expected to find. If letters and coffee are all you're ready for, then that's enough for me. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, staring at our hands. Then she stood, still holding on to me, and moved around the table until she was standing right in front of me. What if I'm ready for more? She whispered. What if I'm just scared? I stood too close enough now that I could see the flecks of blue in her gray eyes, smelled the lavender scent of her shampoo. Then we'll be scared together, I said. She leaned forward and kissed me. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than an answer. Her lips were soft, and she tasted like the peppermint tea she'd had that morning. I let her set the pace, let her hands find my shoulders, let her break away when she needed to breathe. Oh, she said, slightly dazed. Oh, I agreed. That was ... yeah. We stood there, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. I've been thinking about that for weeks, Evelyn admitted. Only weeks? I've been thinking about it since the wrong table. She laughed, and I felt it against my lips. Then she kissed me again, more confident this time, deeper. My hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she made a small sound that went straight through me. When we finally broke apart, she looked as unsteady as I felt. We should probably leave, she said, glancing at the research room door. Before someone needs this space, right? Yes. Professional behavior. Very professional. But neither of us moved. Evelyn, would you like to have dinner with me? Real dinner? At a real restaurant? At the right table? What? She smiled, reaching up to straighten my collar. I thought you'd never ask. Friday night. There's a little Italian place in the West Village. The owner's daughter is in my Victorian poetry class. Will she give you a good table? The best table. I promised to write her a glowing recommendation letter. Using your position. For personal gain? Professor Walsh? Absolutely. She kissed me again, quick and sweet. Friday night, the right table. I'll be there. The restaurant was small and warm, with checkered tablecloths and wine bottles lining the walls. Rosa, my student, seated us in a corner booth with a candle already lit and a knowing smile on her face. Your best table, she said to me. Then, to Evelyn, he's a very good professor. But you probably already know that. I'm learning, Evelyn said graciously. After Rosa left, I looked at Evelyn across the table. Really looked at her. She wore a deep red dress I hadn't seen before, and her hair was pinned up again, showing the elegant line of her neck. I thought about kissing that neck and had to remind myself we were in public. You're staring, Evelyn said, but she didn't seem to mind. I'm appreciating. There's a difference. Staring is mindless. Appreciation is intentional. She laughed, unfolding her napkin. Do you always talk like a literature professor? Only when I'm nervous? You're nervous. We've been having coffee. Every morning for a month? This is different, I said. This is an actual date. At the right table. With wine and expectations and Theodore, she interrupted gently. Breathe. I did. She reached across the table and took my hand. Better, she asked. Better. We ordered wine and pasta that Rosa promised was her grandmother's recipe. As we waited for the food, I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket. I wrote you something, I said, sliding it across the table. Evelyn's eyes lit up. Brought a letter to dinner? I told you, old-fashioned. She opened it carefully, her lips moving slightly as she read. I watched her expressions shift: surprise, pleasure, something that might have been tears. Theodore, she whispered when she finished. This is ... double quotes. Too much. Perfect. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it in her purse. No one's ever written me poetry before. It's not very good poetry. It's terrible poetry, she agreed, smiling. But it's mine, which makes it perfect. Our food arrived, and we ate and talked about everything her childhood in Philadelphia. My summers in Maine, the terrible academic politics at Columbia, the eccentric researchers who came through the library. It was easy, comfortable, like we'd been having dinners together for years instead of weeks. Tell me something, Evelyn said, as we shared tiramisu for dessert. Why did your engagement really end? You said she married your roommate, but that's the what, not the why? I set down my fork, considering how much to share. But we'd promised each other honesty, even when it hurt. Elizabeth and I were together for 3 years, I began. We met in graduate school. She was brilliant, studying 19th century American literature. We had everything in common, or so I thought. What happened? I did. Or rather, I didn't. traced patterns on the tablecloth. She wanted me to be present, to share my feelings, to let her in. But every time things got difficult or emotional, I'd retreat into my work, into my books. It was safer to analyze fictional relationships than deal with my own. Evelyn was quiet, listening. The night she left, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "You love the idea of love, Theodore. You love reading about it, teaching it, discussing it in the abstract. But you're terrified of actually living it." Was she right? Yes, I admitted. She was completely right. And 6 months later, she married James, my roommate, my friend. Someone who could actually be vulnerable with her. That must have hurt. It did. But the worst part was knowing she was right. That I'd sabotaged the relationship because I was too afraid to be real. Evelyn set down her spoon and looked at me directly. "And now, with me? Are you still afraid?" "Terrified," I said honestly. "But I'm trying, Evelyn. These letters, these conversations, this is me trying to be different, to be better." She reached across the table and cupped my face gently. "You are better, Theodore. You're here. You're trying. It's all anyone can ask." I turned my head and kissed her palm. "Your turn. Tell me something hard." She pulled her hand back, folding it with her other one in her lap. "My parents died when I was 19. Car accident. One moment they were driving to my college to pick me up for Thanksgiving, and the next, ... She trailed off. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry. It's been 13 years, but sometimes it still feels like yesterday." She took a shaky breath. "Beatrice was my roommate then. She's the one who held me together when I couldn't function. Made sure I ate and went to classes and kept breathing. Is that why you hide in the archives?" "Partly. Dead people feel safer because they can't leave unexpectedly, can't disappear in an instant and take your whole world with them." She met my eyes. "But that's not living, Theodore. It's just surviving, and I'm tired of just surviving." I stood up and moved to her side of the booth, sliding in beside her. She leaned into me immediately, and I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" I said softly. "Both terrified of the very thing we want most, at least. We're terrified together." We sat like that for a while, Rosa tactfully avoiding our table, the restaurant humming with other people's conversations around us. Finally, Evelyn pulled back and looked at me. "Take me home," she said. My heart stuttered. "Home, your place, or mine? I don't care. I just want to be alone with you." "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay." I paid the bill while Evelyn gathered her coat, and we walked out into the November night. The air was crisp, promising winter, and Evelyn shivered slightly. I pulled her close, and we walked the 10 blocks to my apartment building in comfortable silence. My apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a literature professor. Books everywhere. Comfortable but worn furniture, papers stacked on every surface. I kicked aside a pile of student essays to clear a path. "Sorry, I wasn't expecting it's..." "Perfect," Evelyn said, already moving to my bookshelves. "Oh, you have the complete Brontë collection. First editions, some of them." She pulled out Jane Eyre, handling it reverently. "This is beautiful." I watched her explore my space, touching books, examining photographs, making herself at home. When she reached my desk, she stopped. "Theodore," she said slowly, "are these all letters to me?" I'd left them out that morning, the stack of letters I'd written but not sent. Drafts and false starts and things I wasn't quite brave enough to say yet. "Some of them," I admitted, feeling heat creep up my neck. She picked up the top one, looking at me for permission. I nodded. "Dear Evelyn," she read aloud. "I'm writing this at 3 in the morning because I can't sleep for thinking of you. I keep replaying that moment in the research room when you kissed me, and I wonder if you know that it changed everything, that I haven't been the same since." She looked up, eyes shining. "You wrote this 2 weeks ago?" I couldn't send it. It felt like too much too soon. "What else?" She gestured to the stack. "Evelyn, please, I want to know." I crossed to her and picked up another one. "This one's from last Tuesday. I think I'm in love with you. I know it's too early to say that, to feel that, but watching you laugh at the cafe this morning, I couldn't deny it anymore. You asked what I was thinking, and I lied and said I was worried about my lecture. Really? I was thinking that I want to wake up to that laugh for the rest of my life. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. Say it again, Evelyn whispered. What? The part about loving me. Say it again, out loud, not in a letter. My hands shook slightly. As I set down the paper, I love you, Evelyn Clark. I know it's too soon, and I know we're both disasters at this, but I love you. She kissed me then, deeply, desperately, like she'd been holding back and finally couldn't anymore. We stumbled toward my couch, knocking over a stack of books neither of us cared about. Her hands found their way into my hair, and mine mapped the curve of her waist, her back, places I'd only imagined touching. Tell me to stop. I breathed against her neck. If this is too fast, don't you dare stop, she said, pulling me closer. I love you too, Theodore Walsh. I've loved you since the wrong table. We stayed on that couch for hours, learning each other slowly, carefully, with the reverence we both brought to precious manuscripts. Every touch was a letter, every kiss a declaration. And when we finally moved to my bedroom, tangled together in sheets and moonlight, I understood why people wrote poetry about moments like this. Some things were beyond words, but we'd spend the rest of our lives trying to find them anyway. I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, and the unfamiliar weight of another person in my bed. For a moment I panicked, then I remembered Evelyn. She was still asleep, her dark hair spread across my pillow, one hand curled under her cheek. In sleep, she looked younger, unguarded. I wanted to memorize this moment, file it away with all the other Evelyn moments I'd been collecting, as if, sensing my gaze, her eyes fluttered open. For a second, she looked confused, then recognition dawned, followed by a smile that made my chest ache. Good morning, she said, voice rough with sleep. Good morning. We lay there, just looking at each other, until Evelyn laughed softly. This is weird, right? The morning after? Extremely weird. Do we pretend nothing happened? Make awkward small talk about breakfast? I was thinking we could skip straight to the part where I tell you that last night was extraordinary and I'd very much like to do it again. Her smile widened. That works. 2. I reached for her, pulling her close, and she came willingly, fitting against me like she'd always belonged there. We stayed like that until my alarm went off, the one I'd forgotten to turn off, because I'd been too distracted by Evelyn to think about practicalities. What time is it? She mumbled against my shoulder. 7. I have office hours at 9. And I have a meeting with the head archivist at 8:30. She didn't move. Neither did I. We should get up, I said. We should. Still, neither of us moved. Finally, Evelyn pulled back, and I immediately missed her warmth. She sat up, pulling the sheet with her, suddenly self-conscious in the morning light. Hey, I said gently, touching her arm. No regrets? No regrets, she confirmed. Just ... processing. This is new for me. Staying over part. The morning after part. All of it. We can go slow. She laughed. Theodore, we've been writing love letters and having philosophical discussions about Victorian correspondence for weeks. Then last night she blushed. We weren't exactly slow. Fair point. Right. I don't regret it, she said firmly. I just don't know what happens now. We keep having coffee every morning. Do we pretend this doesn't change things? No. Do we? I kissed her, cutting off the spiral of questions. When I pulled back, she looked steadier. We keep having coffee. I said, we keep writing letters. We keep being us. Just more. However much more you're comfortable with. I want all the more, she admitted. That's what scares me. Then let's be scared together. Again, she kissed me this time, soft and sweet. I need to go home and change before work. I'll walk you, Theodore. It's 20 blocks out of your way. I don't care. So we got dressed, Evelyn in her red dress from dinner, me in yesterday's shirt, and walked through the Saturday morning streets at her building. She turned to face me, Same time, Monday morning? She asked. Terrible coffee and pastries? Unless you want to skip the cafe and just come here for breakfast. It's very domestic of you, Professor Walsh. It's that. A yes? She pretended to consider it. I'll think about it and let you know. In a letter. You're going to write me a letter about whether you'll have breakfast with me? I told you. Some things are easier on paper. I pulled her close, not caring that we were standing on a public street in full view of her neighbors. Then I'll write you back, and we'll have an entire epistolary relationship about breakfast logistics. We're ridiculous, she said, but she was smiling, completely. She kissed me goodbye and disappeared into her building, and I walked to campus, feeling like the world had shifted slightly on its axis. Everything looked different, brighter, sharper, more alive. My office hours were a disaster. I couldn't focus on student questions about their papers when my mind kept drifting to Evelyn's laugh, her hands the way she'd looked in my bed. Finally, a student, a sharp junior named Alice, called me out. Professor Walsh, you haven't heard a word I've said. Have you? I'm sorry, Alice, I'm a bit distracted today. She grinned knowingly. The good kind of distracted? Is it that obvious? You've been smiling at your coffee for 10 minutes? So either you're having a mental breakdown, or you're in love. Can't it be both? She laughed and gathered her things. Whoever she is, she's lucky. Try to focus before your 2 o'clock lecture, though. Actually need you coherent for Wuthering Heights. After she left, I pulled out paper and my fountain pen. Dearest Evelyn, I've been home for 3 hours and already. I miss you. This is unprecedented and slightly alarming. My students have noticed. I suspect the entire English department will know by Monday that Professor Walsh has finally lost his mind. About breakfast. Yes. Every morning, your place or mine, I don't care. I just want to wake up to you. Is this too much? Am I moving too fast? My instinct is to pull back, to protect myself, to do what I always do, and hide behind careful words and safer distances. But then I remember the way you looked at me last night and this morning, and I think maybe the risk is worth it. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I need to slow down. I'll listen, I promise. But please don't ask me to stop loving you. I don't think I could, even if I tried. Yours completely. Theodore. I mailed it on my way to my afternoon lecture. I found her response in my mailbox that evening. Theodore, I got your letter an hour ago, and I've read it 6 times. Beatrice found me crying over it and asked if you'd broken up with me. I had to explain that these were happy tears. She found both touching and ridiculous. Here's my answer. Yes to breakfast. Yes to every morning. Yes to all of it. I'm scared too. Keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to realize I'm too much, or not enough, or too complicated. But then I remember the way you look at me like I'm the only person in the room, and I think maybe I can be brave enough for this. Don't slow down. Don't pull back. Just keep being exactly who you are. I love you. I'm saying it again because it still feels new and terrifying and wonderful. Yours completely too, Evelyn P. S. I'm enclosing a key to my apartment, not because you have to use it, but because I want you to have it. It's just in case. The key fell into my palm, small, brass, ordinary, extraordinary. I held it for a long time, understanding what it meant. Not just access to her apartment, but access to her life, her trust, her heart. I put it on my keyring immediately. The cafe had terrible coffee and excellent pastries. And we'd been coming here every morning for a year. Well, almost every morning. Some mornings we stayed in bed too long, tangled together in my apartment or hers, and arrived late to work with matching smiles and knowing looks. But most mornings we met here at 7:30, same corner table, same routine we'd built together one day at a time. You're doing it again? Evelyn said, looking up from the book she was reading. Doing what? Staring? You've been staring at me for 5 minutes instead of grading those papers? I'm appreciating, I corrected. There's a difference. Right. She smiled. Same smile that had first caught me at the wrong table a year ago. What are you appreciating? The way you bite your lip when you read? You've always done that? I noticed it the first time I saw you. That's very observant for someone who sat at the wrong table. Best mistake I ever made. She reached across the table and took my hand, thumb brushing over my knuckles. Mine too. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, her reading, me pretending to grade papers, but really just watching her. The cafe filled with morning regulars around us. The businessman who always ordered the same black coffee, the student who brought her laptop and stayed for hours, the elderly couple who shared one croissant and read the newspaper together. We'd become regulars too, part of the landscape. The couple in the corner who wrote letters to each other even though they sat at the same table. "I have something for you," I said, pulling an envelope from my bag. Evelyn's eyes lit up. "You wrote me a letter? You just saw each other 12 hours ago? Some things need to be said on paper." She opened it carefully, like she always did, preserving the envelope for the collection she kept in a box under her bed. I'd seen that box once, every letter I'd ever written. Her organized chronologically, tied with ribbon. As she read, I watched her expression shift. Confusion, then understanding, then shock. "Theodore," she whispered, looking up. "Is this her you read it all the way through first?" Her hand shook slightly as she continued reading. When she finished, she set the letter down carefully and stared at me with tears in her eyes. "You want me to move in with you?" "I want to wake up next to you every morning," I said. "I want your books on my shelves and your tea in my kitchen and your handwriting on my grocery lists. I want all of it, Evelyn. All of you. We've only been together a year, I know. That's fast. I know that too. What if we're making a mistake? What if we move in together and realize we drive each other crazy?" "Then we'll drive each other crazy together," I said, echoing words I'd said a year ago. "We've been staying at each other's places 4 nights a week anyway. This just makes it official." Was quiet, worrying her bottom lip the way she did. When she was thinking hard about something. "What if I'm messy?" she asked. "What if I leave books everywhere and forget to do dishes and take too long in the bathroom? Then I'll pick up your books and do the dishes and wait patiently for the bathroom. What if I want to paint the bedroom purple? Like purple. What if I snore? You do snore. I've slept next to you approximately 168 times. I'm well aware. That surprised a laugh out of her. "You counted?" "I notice things," I said, quoting her words from that first night. "It's what I do." She picked up the letter again, rereading parts of it. "You wrote that you want to build a library with me, a shared collection, our books together. It's organized however we want. Maybe chronologically, maybe by color, maybe complete chaos. I don't care as long as it's ours." That's very romantic for someone who claims not to be good at relationships. It had a good teacher. She smiled, wiping at her eyes. "I haven't said yes yet." "I know. Take your time. Think about it." "We don't have to yes," she interrupted. "What?" "Yes, Theodore. I'll move in with you. I want the shared library and the morning coffee and all of it." She leaned across the table and kissed me, quick and fierce. "But I'm keeping my apartment for 6 months just in case." "In case of what?" "In case you realize I'm impossible to live with." "You are impossible," I agreed. "Impossibly smart and impossibly stubborn and impossibly perfect for me." That's terrible poetry again, I know, but it's true. We grinned at each other like idiots while the cafe hummed around us, and I thought about how a year ago I'd sat at the wrong table and found exactly the right person. "We should celebrate," Evelyn said. "Dinner at that Italian place, the one where we had our first real date. Rosa will be thrilled. She asks about you every time I see her." "Because I'm her professor's girlfriend who works with dead people? Because you're memorable?" Evelyn stood, gathering her things. "I have to go. Meeting with a researcher about the Harriet Beecher Stowe collection. But I'll meet you there at 7. I'll be there at the right table this time." "It's the right table," she agreed, then paused. "Although technically, the wrong table was pretty right too. The best kind of wrong." She kissed me goodbye and headed toward the door, then turned back. "Theodore." "Yes, I love you. Just in case you forgot in the last 10 minutes, I love you too. And I never forget." After she left, I sat there finishing my terrible coffee, thinking about how much had changed in a year. How the cautious, closed-off professor who'd sat at the wrong table had slowly learned to be vulnerable. How the woman who hid in archives had learned to be brave. We still wrote each other letters, still had our morning coffee ritual, still scared each other sometimes with the depth of what we'd found, but we were learning together. That love wasn't about being perfect or fearless. It was about showing up every morning at 7:30, even when you were scared. It was about writing your truth on paper when you couldn't say it out loud. It was about building something real one day, one letter, one terrible cup of coffee at a time. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn, "Already missing you. Is that pathetic?" I smiled and typed back, "Completely pathetic. I'm missing you too. See you tonight. Right table, right person." "Right everything," I replied. As I gathered my things and headed to campus, I thought about Margaret Fletcher and Henry Morrison, the two scholars who'd written to each other for 40 years. We'd finished reading their correspondence last month, and Evelyn had cried at the last letter Henry writing to Margaret's sister after the funeral, saying that he'd lost his best friend, the love of his life, even though they'd only met once. "Won't be us," Evelyn had said fiercely, clutching my hand. "We're going to have both the letters and the life together." And we would. We'd write each other love notes and share breakfast and argue about book organization. We'd have the intellectual intimacy of correspondence and the physical intimacy of shared mornings. We'd have everything. All because I'd sat at the wrong table and she'd told me. My eyes wanted me to stay. Sometimes the best love stories start with a mistake. Sometimes the wrong choice is exactly right. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the person you're not supposed to meet becomes the person you can't imagine living without. I pulled out my phone one more time and sent another text. "Thank you for noticing my eyes that night, for telling me to stay." Her response came immediately. "Thank you for being brave enough to listen. I'd sit at 1,000 wrong tables if it meant finding you." "Only 1,000? I'd sit at 1,000,000 show -off. Literature professor." It's my job to be dramatic. I was still smiling when I reached my office, still thinking about Evelyn and wrong tables and right people when Dorothy called. "So," my sister said without preamble, "I heard you asked Evelyn to move in with you. How did you? Beatrice told you, didn't she?" "Obviously. She's thrilled." "I'm thrilled. When's the wedding?" "Dorothy, I'm just saying, if you screw this up, I'm keeping her and you can find a new sister." "I'm not going to screw it up." "Good, because that woman is the best thing that ever happened to you. And if you revert to your emotionally constipated ways, I will personally, I love her." "Dorothy, not screwing this up." My sister was quiet for a moment. "You really do, don't you? Love her." "More than I knew was possible." "Good," she said softly. "You deserve this, Teddy. You deserve to be happy." After we hung up, I sat at my desk and pulled out my fountain pen. One more letter before my office hour started. "My dearest Evelyn, year ago today, I sat at the wrong table, and you changed my life. Today you agreed to let me wake up beside you every morning. I'm still not convinced I'm not dreaming. I'm not good at this, at loverability, at being the person someone else needs. But I'm learning you're teaching me. Every letter, every morning, every moment, we build together. Thank you for seeing past my defenses. Thank you for being patient while I learned to let you in. Thank you for loving me despite all the ways I'm still figuring this out. I can't promise I'll never mess up or pull away or hide behind books when things get hard, but I can promise I'll keep trying. I'll keep showing up. I'll keep choosing you every single day. Here's to wrong tables and right people. Here's to terrible coffee and excellent love. Here's to us. Forever yours." Theodora sealed the letter and left it on my desk where I'd see it later. A reminder that some mistakes become the best decisions of your life. And when 7 o'clock came and I walked into that Italian restaurant, Evelyn was already there, sitting at our table with a smile. That felt like coming home. The right table, the right person, the right everything.